It is Catholic tradition that the Blessed Virgin Mary entered the temple when she was very young and stayed there until her betrothal to St. Joseph. We actually have a feast of the presentation of the Blessed Virgin Mary, which testifies to the Church's consciousness of this event. So I'm going to read now from chapter 8 of Maria Valtorta's Poem of the Man God, Volume 1, the chapter entitled Mary is Presented in the Temple, given on 30th of August 1944. And this shows that Mary indeed did enter the temple and stayed there for many years until her betrothal. I see Mary between her father and mother walking in the streets of Jerusalem. Passers-by stop to look at the beautiful girl, all dressed in white and wearing a very light mantle. The mantle, because of its design in branches and flowers, which are a little darker against the soft background, seems to be the same one that Anne was wearing on the day of her purification. The only difference is that while it reached down to Anne's waist, in the case of Mary, who is only a little girl, it reaches down to her ankles and envelops her in a small light and bright cloud of rare beauty. Her fair hair, loose on her shoulders, or rather on her gentle neck, shines through the veil where there is no pattern but only the very light background. The veil is held on her forehead by a very pale blue ribbon on which small lilies are embroidered with silver threads, certainly the work of her mother. As I said, the snow-white dress reaches down to the ground, and her little feet can just be seen as she walks in her white sandals. Her hands are like two magnolia petals peeping from the long sleeves. Apart from the blue ribbon, there is no other colour. It is all white. Mary seems to be dressed in snow. Joachim is wearing the same garment he had on for the purification. Anne instead is wearing a very dark violet dress. Also the mantle, which also covers her head, is dark violet. She is holding it lowered below her eyes. Two poor eyes of a mother, red with tears, that do not wish to weep, and above all do not wish to be seen crying, but can but shed tears under the protection of the mantle, a protection that serves its purpose with regard to passers-by, and also to Joachim, whose eyes, usually clear, are today red and dull, because of the tears he has shed and is still shedding. He is walking with a stoop. His head is covered by a veil worn in the fashion of a turban, with the folds hanging down along his face. A very old Joachim. Whoever sees him must think that he is the grandfather or the great-grandfather of the little girl he is holding by the hand. The pain of losing her causes the poor father to drag his feet, and he is so weary that he looks 20 years older. He is so sad and tired that he looks like an old sick man. His mouth trembles slightly between the two wrinkles that at the sides of his nose are so deep today. They are both endeavouring to conceal their tears. But if they are successful with many people, they are not with Mary, who because of her height sees them from below and lifting her head looks at her father and mother alternately. They make an effort to smile at her with their trembling mouths, and they hold her tiny hand tightly every time their little daughter looks at them and smiles. They must be thinking, there, a smile to be seen one time less. They proceed slowly, very slowly. They seem to be wishing to protract their journey for as long as possible. Everything serves as a pretext to stop. But a journey must come to an end, and this one is about to end. Up there, at the top of this last stretch of the road, there are the temple walls. Anne utters a groan and holds Mary's hand tighter. Anne, my dear, I am here with you, a voice utters, coming out from the shade of a low arch built over a crossroads. And Elizabeth, who was waiting for them, approaches her and embraces her. And since Anne is crying, she says, "Come into this friendly house for a little while. Then we shall go together. Also, Zacharias is here. Just pause for a moment. This is our first encounter with Zacharias and Saint Elizabeth, the future parents of Saint John the Baptist. They're obviously very young here, because this is when the Blessed Virgin Mary is no more than about 3 years old. And we only encounter them again about 13 years later. 12 to 13 years later, when Mary is pregnant with the Lord Jesus. They all enter a low dark room where the only light is a big fire. The landlady, obviously a friend of Elizabeth's, but unknown to Anne, kindly withdraws and leaves them alone. You must not think that I'm repenting, or I'm giving my treasure to the Lord unwillingly, explains Anne, crying. But it's my heart. Oh, how my heart aches, my old heart, that is returning to its childless solitude. If you could only feel. I know, my dear Anne, but you are good, and God will console you in your solitude. Mary will pray for the peace of her mother, won't you, Mary? Mary caresses her mother's hands and kisses them. She presses them to her face to be caressed, and Anne holds her little face tightly in her hands and kisses it repeatedly. She is never tired of kissing her. Zacharias enters and greets them, saying, "May the peace of the Lord be with the just." "Yes," replies Joachim, "implore peace for us, because our hearts are trembling in our offer, as Abraham's did while he was climbing the mountain. But we shall not find another offer to replace this one. Neither do we want it, because we are faithful to the Lord. But we are suffering, Zacharias. Since you are a priest of God, please understand us and do not be perturbed." Just a slight pause there, as I'm sure you know. The reference to Abraham there is when he took his son Isaac up Mount Moriah to sacrifice him, as he thought, under God's orders, to kill him. But of course God held his hand back and said no, this was a test. And then a ram is found caught in some brambles, and then Abraham and Isaac sacrifice that. But here, as Joachim is saying, we shall not find another offer to replace this one.